The Spanish Grand Prix has proved that the Mercedes upgrades have worked and brought a little new trick that could very much help them going further down the line. My thoughts on the Spanish Grand Prix: how are these upgrades working and what is that new little trick? It was a good race in the beginning, a lot of action through the midfield and a lot of actually drivers creeping up through overtakes and a lot of teams falling back. Lando made a mistake in the beginning. The McLarens are very bad in race pace, and I kind of predicted this would be the case. Lewis Hamilton, smart in his tires, Russell, smart in his tires, and the car genuinely just really performed here. Red Bull, I would say Max by himself is still out of this league, but it is very reassuring for Mercedes that they're at least fast enough, and if not even faster than Perez on really most of the laps that they did in the race. It would have been arguably a pretty close race if Lewis started in second, was able to manage his tires a lot better with this new trick to their new car. Aston Martin had a pretty sloppy race, if you ask me, had a bad strategy. Fernando was conserving tires, I think, for a little bit too long, but also the soft wasn't the right call. They at least needed to go for a medium hard or a different type of strategy. Mercedes, I think, had the right call going soft, medium, soft. Maybe it was too hard going on the hard tires. We did hear Max Verstappen complaining about it practically the whole entire race, having no grip, so I could just imagine really putting its last stint out and also not going for Lance. Lance had a pretty controlled race in my opinion, but I think he could have at least competed with the Ferrari or maybe one Mercedes. The actual Ferrari team seems to be a little bit more consistent, which is good, I guess, for us to see if they can actually perform, but their race pace is still pretty far behind, and Charles cannot even get into the point. So it's got to tell you that that car isn't as extremely good as I guess we've really seen in the beginning of the 2022 season. It's not even close in this 2023 season. As for the other teams, Haas is absolutely nowhere. They only have quality pace, car's gone. Alpha, Zhou is my second driver of the day, if not for Lewis. It was a great race from him as well, and Yuki, that is such an unfortunate penalty. The FIA should have not given that. It was such a poor judgment call. Their calls are super inconsistent, and this is why the FIA gets so much slack from everybody. You can't just make a call randomly. It was not even an intentional driving them off of really the circuit. It was just kind of a racing incident, and it wasn't even like a push-off in my personal opinion. It was hard defending, fair defending. I don't really know what else you want the drivers to do. They were very clean throughout the whole entire race. There were no crashes, there were no safety cars. The only real penalty we got was Yuki and Verstappen almost getting one for track limits, which arguably, was he even really going over track limits, or were they just trying to find a way to stop him? But let's get into more about Mercedes. So a P2 and a P3, a very solid performance from both the actual drivers. Why was this? Why did the car really perform here? And what is really the history behind Spain for Mercedes? Well, the new track layout was definitely a gem to watch. It actually shows you how much the cars are on the limits, and it makes the race a lot more entertaining, a lot more overtakes, but it also shows which cars have really the better type of force of downforce. Mercedes has been consistent with this throughout really the years that have been coming. We had that last chicane, so that didn't really perform for anybody, but especially a car that had that very long car that Mercedes had. Now, a shorter car like Red Bull will go a lot better over the curbs, but a longer car will struggle with that a lot more because it's more reliant on smoother tracks. Hence why, even in 2022, the W13 performed on Silverstone, Spain, any track that has like that kind of very flat layout, but a very nice track for testing. I guess Bahrain was also a decent track for them in the beginning of the year, but still, it's tracks that have that very flat formatted layout, but makes the car, they're able to actually really lower their car. Now that is the big trick that they really brought here. Before we get even more into it, I just wanted to thank you guys all so much. I haven't said this in a while, and I wanted to say thank you guys all so much. You guys are genuinely the best, and I love you. We passed 4,000 subscribers the other day ago, and genuinely means the world. So if you're not subscribed, please do. Let's continue with the video. So the trick that they brought. What is the trick that really now this car can do? Well, something that this car can do that the no side pod design could not, and absolutely could not. One thing that did happen was a little bit of porpoising here, which is to be expected. It's still a brand new type of floor, and they have to get it down to really the T. So the upgrades will be coming to improve upon that little porpoising they had. In the race, this wasn't noticeable, but in qualifying, especially for Russell's case, the car did porpoise a bit going into the last right-handers. Really that last part that is new to the track. It porpoised, and it didn't allow for him to be as much onto the gas pedal as other drivers. Now the Mercedes car was actually able to almost take it flat. They were just as close as Red Bull and Aston Martin. Those were the three teams with the exception of actually, funny enough, Alfa Romeo, they all had the best type of mechanical grip. Now Ferrari, on the other hand, they had to brake and they had the latest really going onto the full throttle going into that turn. Now Mercedes and Red Bull and Aston Martin were pretty much even. Actually, Alfa almost had the advantage on all three of them, but Alfa is the slower car and went for a lot more downforce. It comes to show you, first of all, they have a lot of downforce. Second of all, looking at the car in this picture, one thing that you can drastically notice, especially on this track where really being able to put the car as low as possible is the best outcome you can get. Red Bull has been able to put their car stupidly low, lower than anybody by almost, was it a 0.015 millimeters? So they were able to have that advantage, especially going down the straights. Now, the Mercedes car is still pretty draggy, but I guess that is to be expected now with how the car is. It's a different car. They have to find ways to really reduce that drag, but even Toto Wolff talks about it. Now the car is in its base form, which works, performs really well, and they can actually pick up from that and now just add more downforce, reduce the drag, and actually work on stuff that is useful for their car instead of going really in reverse and not knowing why the car is performing as bad as it is. Now it's about gaining additional margins. They can run their car a lot lower. This is the biggest thing as to what they struggled with the no side pod design. The car always had to be really ridden at a higher height to not have that porpoising effect, but also it made their rear very loose because the higher they really put up the car, the weaker the rear is, but also they also have a lot more drag now onto the car and they aren't able to extract the most out of their floor. It's like a big counter effect being able to actually raise that car. But lowering the car, being able to do what Red Bull does, they're still not to that extent, to be honest. There is still a lot more performance to be found in that underfloor of the car, in particular, or the upper. I mean, it's really the whole entire car that still needs to get developed, but on race pace, they weren't far off from Red Bull. Sure, Max was managing, but they were thoroughly ahead of Perez, and Perez had no chance of catching both Russell and Hamilton. Now, is this to do with Perez? A little bit, definitely. I mean, I think he had a poor race, if I'm being honest. I think that car is so fast, especially on a track like Spain, that he has no excuse not to be into the podium. At least grabbing P3, because let's say Lewis was performing a really well race. But Lewis was managing for a lot of the race as well. Probably could have gotten maybe a little closer to Max, but Max is also managing. So the actual pace discrepancy between the two of them wasn't able to be found. But like I said, a lot of bright sides to this new upgraded car, especially with it being lower to the ground. And as I mentioned before, we also got a happier Lewis Hamilton. At the end of the race, we saw how he was with the car. He was very happy with his performance. We got to step it up. The car is still a little too quick to Red Bull, but they're getting there. They're actually getting to a point where like, hey, we're looking to fight now for P2 and 3. Now, I do believe that the Aston Martin had a very bad race here in Spain. I don't think that this is going to be necessarily the trend throughout the whole entire year still. They're bringing big upgrades to Canada. Is Mercedes going to? I don't know. They just brought a package here to Spain that were a couple extra additional stuff. Brought something to the side pod inlet, a couple more additions to its floor. So, and its rear diffuser. It was another big thing brought to the car. Maybe they got a hint off of Red Bull. Maybe they just added something that was already really in the works to be added to the car. We don't actually officially know just yet, but definitely improvements from the car. Monaco was never going to be a track where we were able to see the full extraction of this car, and we were always going to see a stronger Aston Martin on that track because that is a track that was more suited to him. Now going into Canada, I would say it's a huge toss-up between Mercedes and Aston Martin on who will take that P2 position. I don't feel like Red Bull will have the pace they had here in Spain to really fly away from both Aston and Mercedes. It will be a lot closer in that type of discrepancy, and we could see a lot closer battling going into Canada, especially within the first couple of laps, if Max Verstappen doesn't get that incredible launch like he did really here in Spain. Carlos didn't send it from the side, so Max had the whole race to really manage, go as fast as he wanted to, not really worry about any other cars. There was no reason to see Max's full-out pace. When we actually get to see that pace, we'll finally be able to see, hey, this W14 is closer on race pace merit. I do believe that to be so. I do believe that these upgrades really are working. As I even talked about, I finally got a prediction right with Hamilton actually getting into the podium positions, which is a good sight to see. It's good to see him in the podiums, but I'd love to see a win, especially anybody to take a win, honestly, off of Max Verstappen. It'd be nice to see Lewis win this year. It'd be nice to see Fernando win this year. It would be a joy to see this car actually bring out that full out performance like it kind of did in Spain. These upgrades have worked. It does seem like the team is going in the right direction, and there's a lot more to look forward to, really looking ahead as a Mercedes fan. The car is performing better. Will Canada suit the car? It will be a tougher track for them. I do believe so. It's not as flat of a track, but being able to lower the car will help you on any track. And now upgrades coming to the car and really bringing upon that downforce. James Allison also mentions that within the coming races, they will be bringing upgrades consistently because, yet again, this car will be used for their 2024 chassis. They need to know how they're going to change up that chassis to help this car really extract the full performance. Let me know your thoughts down below. What did you guys think of Mercedes' performance, and do you believe that we will be getting a fight sooner? I do think it'll be happening, so let's hope for that fight to happen soon. Mercedes performed a lot better. Please leave a like, subscribe, it'd mean the world, and peace.